The Dragon Lord's Consort Chapter 13, Part 2. Torch saw his 3 scouts fly over to the cave first. Watching them, he spoke. "Well, what happened?" They didn't say a word for Spike when he came out of the cave, holding the giant golden diamond in one arm. No other jewel or piece of hoard accompanied him. A large grin presented over Torch as Spike made his way towards him. He brought that diamond from under his arm and presented it over his head with a golden diamond to Torch. The giant dragon leaned down, seeing that Spike had indeed held the diamond, but noticed its lack of shine. A small snort left him as he plucked the diamond from Spike. "Not as easy as you thought, huh?" Spike shook his head. "I didn't really realize what it truly meant until I..." Torch nodded. "The golden diamond is an oddity in that it falsely leads us into something we are not. The name itself should literally give it away." "Wait, how so?" Spike asked, exhausted from his trial. "First off, there is no such thing as a diamond made of gold. Simple as that. It implies that something that sounds real, but it can't be interpreted as real. Second, the diamond was a false jewel, used to lead hoard stealers and wonders who get near it to get mesmerized by its bright color. However, as they experience the wonderful color and light of it, its true nature is to trap you in it and compel you to take it for yourself. A non-dragon, they would fall into a greedy state, but their minds trapped in eternal fear. For a dragon, if they hoarded it, they would be compelled to eat it and feel like they would become powerful and filled with a sense of strength, in truth leading to a dragon's doom. When it says to give you power, it will instead make you so greed-filled that you become sick or lame to do anything but guard, even if another dragon stole your treasure around you." Spike realized that what he saw in his mind might have come true should he have taken the hoards in the cave. Torch saw his face and gently pushed the diamond at him. "What you saw in it was as false as the diamond itself. Its true colors will only be revealed if you can keep your will strong and your heart filled with those you care for. Ignore what the outer layer of the shell holds and look towards the center." As if hearing his words, the diamond began to lose its golden color, slowly becoming its shiny, almost glistening normal glass-like color, where in the center, a small sliver of light shined. Spike, before the change, saw his reflection of a darker him. After, he just saw himself in the reflection, and that change that he saw before him now was shifting and giving him a clearer vision of himself. His scales looked brighter, more color-toned, and his scales rigid with overlapped pointed edges. The slit in his eyes was diamond-tipped, but he could clearly see the emerald pupil within, sharper with color. Looking at his face, his baby or hatchling fat has all but left, leaving him with a thinner jaw structure. His muzzle had spread out in front of his face, something lost to him apparently since he's always looked forward. Brushing a claw against his face, he noticed his claws had grown too. "Is this from the trial?" he asked, not sure of himself, feeling any changes from the few hours there. "In short," answered Torch, "that is from the night you spent time with my daughter." This caused a small snicker from the scouts. Torch silenced them with a cautionary glare and refocused back on Spike. "The trial itself just enhanced your details." "Wait, what do you mean by that?" Spike asked. "Unfortunately, we no longer have time to discuss this, young Spike. We must get back to finishing your trials." Not arguing, but still full of questions, Spike hopped onto the giant dragon's palm where they all flew off, heading back towards the valley. The dragons of the valley watched as Torch, his scouts, and Spike had all arrived, with Ember impatiently waiting for her consort to return. As her father took a heavy landing, causing a massive gust of wind that blew dust, she shielded herself and allowed for them to properly land. As her father landed, he immediately raised his palm into the air, where he opened his claws to reveal Spike, holding a large diamond. "Behold!" he roared out into the valley, getting the attention of every dragon around. "Spike has finished the first trial, the trial of will over greed." The dragons of the valley roared as Spike looked high from his vantage point, hearing the sounds of thousands of dragons roaring in at his triumphant victory. He wasn't sure if the roars were positive, negative, or just for the sake of roaring, but he knew with that roar came expectations. Once the roar ceased, he was lowered to the ground where he was immediately approached by Ember. In a heart-filled moment, she grabbed him and pulled him into a hug. He was caught off by the sudden interaction, but he held her back with one arm. Though it was also in that second that he realized that he had grown a bit indeed. Now he was close to Ember's breast area, and his arms could actually reach around her frame. Pulling away, she smiled at his victory. "You made it!" He gave a soft nod with a soft smile. "I did, though it was thanks to your dad for giving a helping claw." "Wait, what's that?" "To remember what and who I was doing it for." Her heartbeat raised and her cheeks bristled with warmth at his words. "It is now time for the next part of the trials to commence," her father roared out. Spike looked back towards her. "So what comes next?" he asked. She shrugged.
"Whatever it is, I know you can do it, and just like before, do it with whatever made you help in the first time."
He knew that already, but it was good to be reassured of it. With a small smile, he turned next to her and were approached by the next lord, Elder Darian. The dark green drake as giant as Torch addressed the crowd. "In a remarkable display of will-over greed, the consort of Dragon Lord Ember clearly states that she has chosen a worthy consort. As of now, young Spike carries with him a grand will that shows promise. A will that can help any dragon succeed in any task, so long as they understand their task and how much they must push into their will. What is next for the trial he will face is how a dragon becomes an elder, a dragon worthy of recording history and sharing it with his kin." He became mobile and began to circle the area around Spike. "Elders must learn history not just by living it, but by understanding the past and those before it. Elders must remember details and information that may one day help dragonkind." As he was talking, Spike watched his foots leave deep imprints on the ground, along with his tail leaving a deep gash that created a large circle around him. "Any and all knowledge will be asked if need be, for the most mundane and unassuming dragon." The gash that was created by his tail was deep, with his footprints being large bits of dry earth crushed by his size. "To dragons seeking to be better and intellectual." He was also close to finishing the circle, though Spike was feeling a bit dreaded at being surrounded by the circle. "With hatchlings and young ones, wondering the values of life, hordes, scales, and the world in general, we, as elders, must burden and carry life's work into our heads." He stopped just then as his tail caught up to the circle point where he started and his footsteps began. "But in the time it takes for information to happen, it can be taken away." He leaned down with a gagging sound, leaving his large throat. He allowed thick fluids of saliva drop from his mouth onto the floor. Spike almost gagged at the reflux and shuddered as the elder allowed the fluid to fall from his mouth into the deep circle he created. Spike saw the trench filled with the elder's saliva. Once it was almost filled, the Darian leaned up slightly with his eyes focused on Spike. "Life happens in an instant." He scratched his lower jaw to his upper jaw, which caused a spark to fly out and directly into the liquid pit. The reaction was almost instant, with the whole circle instantly up in flames. Spike gasped in surprise, and he was surrounded with green and yellow fire. "And it is your job to record everything in your mind, from a single leaf that falls from a tree that may hold the secrets to the universe, or from the air around you that warns you that change is coming." Seeing the flames surround him, he wondered what the point was of it all. He was a dragon, which meant he was fireproof, so why surround him in flames? "My flames differ from those of yours or others," Darian spoke, seemingly reading Spike. "While your flames are those of a gaseous mixture from your chamber and heat from your throat, mine acts differently. Mine is made of liquid tar that is flammable but lingers onto a dragon. While you may be fireproof on your scales, the tar is mixing with the floor below you." Indeed, the fire surrounding Spike was slowly, almost gradually, eating the floor around him at a snail's pace. "The floor is a rock-based flammable material ponies call magnesium. It easily ignites with simple fire and can be quick to burn. However, my saliva is creating a rather slow burn." Spike saw that the circle around him was slowly but surely shrinking. "If it catches on your scales, it won't burn right away, but you will become irritated and your scales will begin to crack or break under the pressure, at which point pain will slowly commence." Spike's eyes went wide and he wanted to explain his fear, but he was interrupted. "Your trial, young Spike, is to use your knowledge, your history, and your mind to give me answers I seek. Your short lifespan has been given more stories and adventures than most dragons had ever seen in their long lifespans." The heat was slowly starting to warm his scales, and unlike lava or regular fire, Spike was fearing this. "At any point I have found that your answers are efficient, or that you have found a way to escape this, you will pass. If, however, you do not provide what I need, you may concede the test and fail the trials. If you take too long to answer, the fire will reach you." Spike felt a wave of nauseating fear fill his body. Never did he expect to deal with something as daunting as surviving fire, even if he was supposed to be fireproof. Yet, the trial demanded knowledge and history, something Spike might be able to give, but what if he asked for something he doesn't know? "Wait, what if I don't know the history or the answer?" "Which is why I am only to ask questions that you are only aware of. The history you've experienced is what I have learned from sources: how a pony hatched your egg,
how you've been a lead through harsh trials in life, saving or condemning those around you.
The fire drew close and Spike started to feel the heat. With a gulp, he looked around in fear and confusion.
Condemn? Who have I? Saving the crystal heart was a feat itself, but you in turn killed off a pony to do so. Do you deny the death of King Sombra?
A voiceless no left him and realized that in help restoring the crystal heart, Sombra was killed.
Did you seek another solution? I couldn't,
he yelled. His legs shook with fear and anxiety, feeling that this was a court trial than a dragon trial.
He was coming after us and wanted to enslave the crystal ponies. Twilight sent me to retrieve the heart before he could. There was no other way. Then if that's the case, should a moment come once more where you must save the lives of many by sacrificing the few, would you do so?
Spike's mind flew 1,000,000 miles a minute, overthinking the question. Save many, if it meant the death of few? Why did death have to be involved? Never in his life had he ever had to deal with a question as harsh as this, nor experience what the situation would bring. The fire began to draw even closer, with less than 4 pony lengths away.
You're short on time, Spike. Just like with the Crystal Empire, you need to make your choice. There's no other way around it.
Spike continued to try and think of a way and compromise, and... Wait, compromise?
There's no way around it.
What was it? Twilight had once told him an old riddle, but what was it? An unstoppable force meets an immovable object? They compromised. I mean, the same could be in here. Harmony may not always be the first answer, but living with the elements of harmony, he knew that in the end, it would prevail. Looking up, he spoke out loud.
Compromise.
He paused, not sure if that was the right answer before speaking on.
You compromise with the few and many. Peace is not always the first solution, but it's always the one sought after in the end.
Darian remained quiet, which unnerved Spike as the fires consumed the ground before him. Already the magnesium was itching close and wondered how long the next questions would be before he got burning up.
That is an acceptable response. What is sought in the end should be peace, not destruction, for any and all species.
He paused, then motioned his head towards Ember, who was just hovering over just a bit away towards the pit.
What gave you the idea that Ember was better at holding the Bloodstone Scepter than yourself? Why not keep it and rule here?
Now that question was easier, though it still required him to think radically. He looked up to Ember, who gave an encouraging smile and feeling his heart rise.
Ember was just like any other dragon that I've ever met. I thought that all dragons were gonna be rude, cocky, mean, and...
He stopped and shrunk a bit.
Sorry, no offense.
Either every dragon around him took offense and were silently debating on killing him, or they knew what he was saying was true but couldn't really comment on it. Either way, a few looks from dragons around were definitely sent towards him.
Continue,
Darian simply replied.
And I don't know, something in me said that she was different. Not because she was the Dragon Lord's daughter. I saw in her eyes something that just made me see that there could be a better way for dragons to not be so, mean. When we went our separate ways during the trial, I thought it was all for naught, but she came back to help me.
He paused and decided whether or not to mention who caused problems. He made a little mental note that is Garble probably being punished and he shouldn't really have to suffer anymore.
When I held the scepter, it felt wrong, like it didn't feel like it belonged to me.
Whispers of shock and confusion raced through the area surrounding him as he let his words leave his mouth. Even the 4 dragons who have set up the trials for him seemed to be taken aback by this. Darian seemed to be conflicted by the response, though. The fire surrounding him inched closer. He felt that he would not be able to get the answer he sought in time for Spike, so he brought up his large paw and slammed hard in front of him, causing the thunderous boom and a shockwave that Spike had no time to brace for. The fires surrounding him instantly were blown away, leaving nothing but burnt earth. Spike surprisingly remained on foot, though his ears rang slightly from the shockwave. Shaking his head to clear the ringing, Spike saw that the flames had been dissipated and Darian looked up and down at him, looking at the young Drake with intrigued virtue.
Say that once more, Spike. Clearly. I must have misheard you.
Spike hesitated and looked around to see every Drake giving him looks, including Ember with a small smirk on her mouth. He then looked back up towards the Elder.
When I held it, I felt it was wrong, like I shouldn't have taken it. In my claws, I felt power, energy, and more with it.
His face formed a smile as he spoke, but then it dropped.
But I also felt feral, greedy, and I could already visualize what I was willing to do with all that power. I knew it wasn't something I would be able to control or use. I was raised by ponies, not dragons. So my next instinct was to share it with someone, but I didn't want to share it. I wanted to give it to someone who wouldn't abuse that power.
He then looked back towards Ember. The smile had returned.
I gave it to a friend.
Ember's heartbeat raced and warmth spread across her body as she heard those words. It had a profound effect that she'd hoped that this was the end of the trial to go and hold him, regardless of who would see them.
And tell me, Spike, by you giving the Bloodstone Scepter to Ember, you truly believe that she would be better at ruling than yourself? I already had a life back home with my friends and family. I didn't want to leave all that behind just to be a Dragon Lord. Besides, he gave a small smirk. Could you imagine a baby dragon no bigger than your eye ruling hundreds and thousands of dragons with the amount of love and affection given by ponies? I would make every dragon cuddle with one another.
A ruffling of uncomfortableness visually vibrated through the valley as some dragons looked almost appalled, at the same time blessed at Spike's decision over handing the scepter to Ember instead. This seemed to please Darien with a large nod to Spike, and he spoke over to every Drake.
Clearly, your history with the ponies has quite a lot to say about you.
With a loud voice, he spoke to the valley.
Spike has successfully passed the trial.
A majority of the dragons had roared in approval, some even stomping their large paws on the ground to approve the succession. Spike felt complete relief at that, and turned to Ember, whom also shared his relief, but smiled brightly at him. As the roars continued, he did not see Cynthia move in while Darien moved away. When her shadow casted over him, he looked up towards the Scarlet Dragoness. He saw something in her immediately that he didn't really like.
Are we starting the next trial soon?
He asked out loud. With a growl of approval, she inhaled deeply, taking in large amounts of breaths.
We start the trial now.
With that, she released a gigantic blast of fire, engulfing Spike in flame.